Ask me anything by Redactors. Former bank robber here. Ask me anything. My name is Clay. I did this Ask Me Anything 4 years ago and this Ask Me Anything 2 years ago. In keeping with the every 2 years pattern, I'm here for a third, and likely final, Ask Me Anything. I'm not promoting anything. Yes, I did write a book, but it's free to Redditors, so don't bother asking me where to buy it. I won't tell you. Just download the thing for free if you're interested. As before, I'll answer questions until they've all been answered. Ask me anything about bank robbery, prison life, life after prison, anything you think I dodged in the first 2 Ask Me Anythings, the Enneagram, any of my 3 years in the 9th grade, autism, my all-time favorite Fortnite video, fuzzball, my post-comment history, tattoo removal, being rejected by Amazon after being recruited by Amazon, anything else not listed here, E1, stopping to eat some lunch. I'll be back soon to finish answering the rest. If the mods allow, I don't mind live streaming some of this later if anyone gives a shit. E2, back for more. No idea if there's any interest, but I'm sharing my screen on Twitch. If you're curious what looks like being asked a zillion questions, same username there is here. E3, stopping for dinner. I'll be back in a couple hours if there are any new questions being asked. E4, back to finish. Link above is still good if you want to live chat instead of waiting for a reply here. E5, I'm done. Thanks again. Y'all are cool. The link to the free download will stay. Help yourself. : Proof and proof. Aside from your freedom and robbing banks, what's the one thing you missed the most about the outside while you were in the clink? Hugs. I've never been in jail or prison but I miss these too. How did the other prisoners treat you when they heard you are a bank robber? There's a weird level of respect that the guys inside have for bank robbers. I don't know why, but that's just the way it is. They're fascinated with it just like anyone else. Probably because in American history some of the most notorious villains were bank robbers. Being rejected by Amazon after being recruited by Amazon. I get the feeling you want to talk about this. What happened with Amazon? I'm betting he applied, got through the interview process, went for the background check, and the hiring process ended there. But that's just a swag. Pretty much. Got through to orientation and all that stuff. They called a few days before my first day and basically said never mind. The most annoying part was that I spoke openly at every step, from the recruiter to the person who interviewed me and then the person who led orientation, about my criminal history and asked if I was wasting my time. Amazon will still sell my book. I just can't work at the place that ships it to you. What rules did you have about engagement during robberies? Presence of kids? Violence? No violence. Just walked in and acted as a regular customer. When it was my turn, I handed the teller a note saying to give me their $50 and $100. I typically clarified that I didn't have a weapon or any intention of hurting them. Fill out a robbery form and go to the back of the line. Is there a bond between bank robbers in prison? Like, do you guys swap stories and become friendly because you're in for the same thing? Oddly, yes. I imagine it's no different than people who've played the same sport or can play the same musical instrument. Nah, mostly just intrigued. Have you ever considered doing a podcast? Especially since your book says you have a lifelong best friend that grew up to be a cop. I can just see this storyline of an ex-bank robber and an ex-cop, neither of who see eye to eye with societal norms of what they're expected to be like, being something that people couldn't turn off, especially if both you guys are funny. Something to think about. I mean, I'd subscribe. Yes, and that friend wants to D. Lol. I just realized who that was. You ducking idiot. Now I want to listen to it. Has the podcast got a name yet? Are there any strange weird moments that stood out to you during your robberies? Like, things you remembered but aren't sure why. Maybe the exact outfit a customer was wearing or something. While waiting in line during the first robbery I did, there was a girl standing in front of me. She had a great butt. Somewhere out there is a girl who doesn't know that a bank robber complimented her butt. At what point did you have the thought, I might have ducked up? I've never quite fully felt that way, frankly. Over the course of your entire career, how much did you make? Not very much, probably like 5 figures. At that point I feel like it's just easier to work for the bank lol. What movie do you think is a realistic heist movie? I mean from planning to execution to aftermath. I don't think any of them are very realistic. Hollywood doesn't really do realism all too well. It's like asking which porn is the most realistic. By default, the professional movies are all a bit fantasy. If I had to pick, I'd say Office Space is probably the most realistic. Well, if that's what gets you off. But I had sex once and it was nothing like Office Space. What's the biggest thing entertainment gets wrong about bank robbing? How much money you get. Well, everyone that I know who robs banks only does it for the passion, not the money. What types of prisoners were treated the best and worst by fellow inmates and prison guards? Worst equals sex offenders. Best equals everybody else. I've heard some terrifying stories about what they do to more specifically rapists and pedophiles. How difficult is it really to rob a bank and get away with it? Who organizes the whole operation? Not very. The only person involved, if they're smart. Right. You don't often hear about the people that got away with it in the long term. Crazy story. What was going on in your head when you were robbing banks? Was it a huge adrenaline rush? Were you scared? Nervous? I would like to know what goes on when you commit a crime like that. Thanks. It felt a bit like riding a roller coaster. There's a sense of danger, but ultimately, it was safe enough to check out. It's obviously riskier than riding a roller coaster, but that's the best analogy I can make. It was crazy, and it was scary, but to some, that's what makes life fun. I'll have to check it out then. What was the closest call for you, where you actually got away with whatever you were doing? Probably the last one. The lady teller kinda freaked out and started screaming to lock the doors. It was a tad stressful to say the least, but I managed to just turn around and walk out as though nothing were happening. They did lock the doors, but it was just after I'd walked out. I don't think the intent was to trap me there, so it's not like I barely got away in that sense. But it was still way too close for comfort. That was the end of it for me. Was there any backup plan for it you were locked in? Or would you resign yourself to your fate? What's something you'd like to share with us that hasn't previously been asked or prompted? Looking for some tidbit of information that you'd really love to share but haven't had the opening for. What was prison actually like? Is that where you got your tattoos? Nah, I got all my tattoos before prison. They were intrigued and a bit tripped out most of the time. It's really not too different than the reactions here. And no, they don't. They do happen, but not at the rate people tend to think. How did you stay in the 9th grade for 3 years? I didn't do the work, so I didn't earn the credit. For all of my life prior to that, the school always passed me because they knew I was smart enough for the next grade even though I never did any work to prove it. But in high school, you actually have to earn it, which I didn't. Something tells me this Trey and the bank robbing have some kind of connection. Do you think the sentence fitted the crime? Number. I think I got less time than I deserved. I'm forever grateful that the judge had something better in mind for me. I've never spoken with him or heard his point of view in detail, but I definitely don't think I got what I deserved. In hindsight, it worked out for the better. Maybe I'm wrong about how many years I deserved or whatever, but I still feel like I got a shit ton of mercy in all of that. You should send the judge a letter. They rarely get anything like that, and it might really be appreciated, especially to see that you've capitalized on the chance you were given. If I drove say 800 miles away from where I live to a city 2 states away, and I only robbed one bank, what are the odds I would get caught? That's an 800-mile drive back. Imagine heat but for 800 miles. So now that you've been out of incarceration, what are you doing for a job and finding a way to make ends meet? Does being a former convict and listed as a bank robber deter you from certain jobs and all that as well? I worked the first job I could get after first getting out. I worked there, production related work, for just over a year before getting a job in the oil and gas industry. I worked there for a few years and then got out because of an injury. There are definitely certain jobs I can't do these days because of my past. For example, bank teller is probably out of the question. The law doesn't provide for discriminating against ex-cons, but most corporations still do exactly that. For the records, I support a company's right to not hire someone based on their past. I actually wish the laws were a little different there because there's just a shit ton of wasted time going into looking for a job because you think things are fair when they're really not. I'd much rather a company be able to proudly boast, hey I. Keep your former criminal ass away from us, because I would do exactly that and look for the former felony friendly companies instead. Should get a job testing escape rooms. I'm not fully read up on your story, but was your history of crime gradual in smaller offenses, or did you go directly to the bank robbery? What could those around have done to prevent this path? The worst crime I'd ever committed prior to the bank stuff was probably stealing candy from a store as a child. There was an incident in my mid-20s where I filed a fraudulent police report saying that someone had stolen my identity. But I don't know how illegal it was since I was pretty vague about the whole thing. Good question. I wish I had something more interesting to say about it. Thanks for watching this Redactors video. Subscribe for the best Reddit videos straight to your feed.